Good evening, this is Ed Hamler with your World in Review. The question of the day is the outbreak of a new nuclear world war moving faster than your willingness, intellectually and emotionally, to face the fact that removing Obama is the only way to prevent that war? On November the 23rd, Russian President Medvedev, who was faced with this reality, issued a national address to the Russian people, whose implicit message was the open recognition of an immediate attempt to draw Russia into an outbreak of global nuclear war, and is determined both to defend Russia under those circumstances and, by warning of this, to try to deter it. The decision by Medvedev to deploy the Iskander missile system in Russia's district of Kaliningrad in response to a U.S.-NATO emplacement of anti-ballistic missile systems in Europe is just one of the many steps they are taking with full recognition of a British-led, with U.S. muscle, engineered war building now to defend themselves. This should serve as a message to those in denial about the actuality of a nuclear war threat now. It's here, and everything is moving in that direction, like parts of a uniform organism, and everyone is playing their part, especially with reference to the Middle East cockpit. According to the British, everything seems to be going according to their nuclear world war plan. Following the move by the Arab League and Turkish foreign ministers to impose sanctions against Syria, including freezing Syrian government assets, stopping dealings with the Syrian Central Bank, and a travel ban on Syrian senior officials. The buildup continues with recent prediction of sorts from French Foreign Minister Alain Juppé, saying that time is running out for Syrian President Assad, with shades of how Libya was dealt with clearly in mind. In Pakistan, the incident last week involving the NATO attack, which left 24 Pakistani soldiers dead, has thrown the coalition strategy in Afghanistan into a crisis. The Pakistan military said the unprovoked attack on border checkpoint in the Moman part of the tribal area on Saturday continued, even after it contacted NATO to plead for the firing to stop. The military has not accepted NATO's explanation for what the coalition has called a tragic incident. This spectacle also exacerbates relations with the U.S., especially after the anger over the unilateral decision by the United States to go into Pakistan to pursue Osama bin Laden. Pakistani cooperation is considered vital in stabilizing the country and the region, but these actions should be seen and recognized as creating intentional destabilization of the entire region on behalf of the British. On Saturday, Pakistan closed the border for supplies to NATO troops in Afghanistan. There's no indication when the border crossing will be reopened. Half the supplies to the coalition soldiers pass by land through Pakistan, including most of the fuel supplies, using local transport companies. On Monday, the All Pakistan Oil Tanker Owners Association said it would only resume transport if Islamabad and the Pakistani military accepted an apology for the incident. Subsequently, China, like Russia, has come to the aid of Pakistan to defend them, trying to calm the situation down, saying, China believes that Pakistan's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity should be respected, and the incident should be thoroughly investigated and be handled properly. Pakistan is also a nuclear power, and when this picture is combined with the already known thrust for a confrontation with Iran, in which recently a senior commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guard said Iran will bomb NATO's missile defense shield in Turkey if the U.S. or Israel attacks Iran, only communicates one thing: nuclear war. Now, I'd personally rather prevent a nuclear war from happening than watching it happen as your daily correspondent reporting on the destruction of this country and the world. But that means that the first act of prevention and the only serious act of diplomacy by the United States is the resignation of Barack Obama. If that doesn't work, impeach him and raise the 25th Amendment immediately. Now, this is going to require something different, actually, to achieve even this, something positive, as in something creative which must be posited, not merely negating or protesting the current war threat. The first thing to recognize in this is that had Lyndon LaRouche's Strategic Defense Initiative been adopted in the late 1980s by the Soviet Union, not only would the current nuclear threat be non-existent, but the entire human race would be organized quite differently. The same organism that now has its parts organized to destroy itself would have had those same elements of the human organism working together to extend its influence in, over, and outside of this planet, consistent with the kind of behavior which distinguishes our species from any other known species to man. For over 3 decades, the lack of an SDI has defined the limits of human behavior and human thought. No wonder we've been reduced to such animals fighting the wars of a British Empire that can only herd and cull us as animals. But the SDI has been revived in the form of a Russian proposal of what is now called the Strategic Defense of Earth, a global system to guard against missiles as well as possible threats to Earth coming from space, including asteroids, comet fragments, and other alien bodies. The system should be capable of both monitoring space and destroying any dangerous objects as they approach the planet. The Russian concept gives an opportunity to propose to the United States an even more global task to save the world, and also do it together with the Russians rather than by ourselves. President Dmitry Medvedev has already showed interest in the proposals and instructed Dmitry Rogozin and his presidential aide to work further on the initiative. In a world that has been plagued recently by phenomena happening on Earth we know nothing about other than the galaxy is changing in various ways has something to do with all this phenomena, the most important aspect of a potential for a new SDI are not the things that we already know, like the SDI will make nuclear war obsolete, but it's the things that we don't know are actually more important. Problems we have to solve which define the limits of our current knowledge and therefore the limits of our survival. So in the context of a needed return to the SDI, take up for a moment some of the questions which only an SDI science-driven perspective for the world can give us the capability of even approaching, which Lyndon LaRouche laid out in his recent policy publication. In it, he poses the real questions we must ask that underlie a successful war avoidance policy. He says, given the consequently menacing changes in our solar system situation, changes which menace the world now, we are obliged to dare to plunge into the matter of not only both presently known developments, but also to work to solve existing, increasingly compelling questions which still remain systematically unresolved issues. For example, the ontological implications of the distinction of living processes from mere substance and the difference of actually cognitive human processes from what are merely living processes have urgent implications which still await serious consideration and sometimes extraordinary forms of corrective action. The crucial point is that the distinction of the human species from the lower forms of life has a certain very specific quality of relatively absolute distinction among species types. Mankind is already a species which naturally tends to evolve intellectually rather than apparently only biologically. In some essential respects of function, we cannot dwell, for at least some significant passage of time of dwelling, in some other parts of the solar system or of our galaxy. We must also consider the case which involves systemic preconditions which might be experienced only among inhabitants of some other parts of our own galaxy, or in the larger regions among which particular galaxies may be found. What of a universal system which includes billions of galaxies? For how long might a fine structure constant within an evolving universe appear to remain constant? Could we believe in the impossibility of some existence of a species possessing the specific quality of life which parallels the systemic distinction of the principle of the noosphere from that of the mere biosphere, as in the case of a species with systemically voluntary powers of creativity, such as our own, but not of any species presently known to us, but mankind? Is there a principle of evolutionary biology which transcends even radical differences from the biology on Earth, but nonetheless replicates the accomplishment of the evolutionary principle shown by the creative developments of the cognitive functions of human biologies on Earth presently? In other words, is the cognitive function we know on Earth one which is subsumed by Earth biology? Or is the presumably human-like cognitive function, despite mere appearances, superior to the specificity of all earthbound-like life forms to be found as specific among radically different kinds of biologies than those associated with the apparent forms of life on Earth? Is human creativity universal, not bounded by biology? Are we the only expression of it? These are just a few of the questions that bound human knowledge currently, and therefore bound us to an inevitable extinction, either by nature itself or by our very own stupidity and lack of knowledge. So survival depends on moving full speed ahead with a science driver program like the SDI. In that context, we can then launch Mr. LaRouche's Operation Kepler in order to get our feelers out there through the combination of satellites and other sensory apparatuses, creating in effect a global sensorium, who, if we juxtapose these together, can give us insight into what is causing what we merely read as effect on Earth. Now, this is going to require a dramatic shift in U.S. policy, rebuilding the manned NASA space policy that the president has done so much to destroy, and also we have to begin building the North American Water and Power Alliance, which will give us some practice at least in regulating the weather and other natural things on our entire planet, being able to take a planetary approach to changing the planet. After all, if you want to know something, change it. This will require long-term capital investments under an international, or rather planetary, credit system under a Glass-Steagall standard. And our economic policy must reflect the vision of the future that we must create in the present. The most pressing present action we must take, which makes all of this even possible, is the removal of Barack Obama from office. If all this is done, perhaps then we can remove the shackles of our own stupidity and lack of imagination, make nuclear war obsolete, and even demonstrate that the human species is an expression of a universal principle of creativity, one which is the only species capable of self-evolution. If we don't evolve, there is no in-between in this matter. We either evolve or die. So the question is, how much time do we really have to stop this war, if indeed we've already effectively rendered ourselves an extinct species by not choosing the kind of policies like the SDI by which we express universal creativity to evolve?